All righty, there we go. Awesome. Welcome, everybody. I see lots of people coming into our webinar now, opening up. If you are joining this webinar, you have found yourself at our Paying for College session hosted by the Admissions Department of Azusa Pacific University. We're so excited and so thankful that you decided to spend just a little bit of your evening with us here tonight. We'll be getting into quite a few nitty-gritty things about financial aid, everything from scholarships to grants to loans and everything in between as well, and even have a time to answer some questions too. And so as people are filing in for our webinar today, I'll give them just a few more moments before we actually go ahead and begin our presentation this evening. But as we're getting ready, something that I do want to draw your attention to right now is the little Q&A button that you're seeing at the bottom of your screen. And so using that button will allow you to engage with me as well as my friend Randall, who's actually in the back right now. He'll be able to answer any quick one-off questions that you may have in that little box. But if there are any larger, more generalized questions, I can actually answer those at the end of our presentation as well. So again, if you're just joining us today, that Q&A box is something that we will be using throughout our evening tonight. So if you have any questions, either right now as you're coming in and you already have those, or if there's something that we touch on today that you'd like to know a little bit more about, please feel free to use that Q&A box that you see at the bottom of your screen. Well, in any case, you probably see my name on the screen anyways, but I'll go ahead and introduce myself. My name is Thomas Chan. I am a senior admissions representative here at Azusa Pacific University. I graduated from APU in 2018, and I've actually been on staff now for a little over 2 years. And so, needless to say, I'm a huge fan of this university and have really grown a lot, both from my time as a student and as a staff member here on campus. And so, I'm very excited to be sharing with you all a little bit of information about financial aid and just some things that you can expect and be on the lookout for as we slowly but surely begin our admission season for this academic school year. All right, and with all of that behind us, I think I will go ahead and begin our presentation today. So last time, again, if you are joining us just this moment, please feel free to utilize that Q&A box with any questions you may have at any point, and we'll be sure to get back to you on those. Without further ado then, what I am going to do is share my screen and we will jump into our presentation for the evening. All right, well, we call this presentation Paying for College because in essence, it's exactly what it will be discussing. All of the nuts and bolts of what it can take to fund a college education, specifically one at a school like ours, which is a private Christian university. And so as we begin today, we'll be touching on a couple quick things. And so there are 4 parts to our feature presentation today, all of which I wanted to give you right from the top. And so those 4 parts are going to be what you see in front of you today. So we'll be talking about investment and affordability, scholarships, grants, and loans. So 4 different categories throughout our presentation. So we'll jump straight into our first category, and that is going to be investment and affordability. And so, of course, in today's day and age, the cost of a college education is oftentimes not cheap. And so the first question that may be coming into your minds is, what am I actually paying for? Right? Where is all of my time, my effort, and my hard-earned cash really going towards? And what's it going to get for me once all is said and done? So that is a big question that we often face here in admissions quite a bit. And so we wanted to start off by addressing that question right off the bat. And so to put it simply, there are 2 things that we typically will answer this question of value with. Those 2 things are related together, and it's what you see here. We talk a lot about employability and not only your short-term, but your long-term value as a person as well. So we'll break those 2 things apart a little bit more as to what that looks like. But here at APU, what you are investing in are quite a few different resources that set us apart from many other institutions that you'll find across the United States. So a couple of those things that we'd like to highlight today are our student to faculty ratio. Given the size of campus that we have about 3,000 undergraduate students on our campus. What's great about that is a small, exceptionally so, class size of 12 students for every professor. So that really means is that for you as a student studying here, you really get those deep, close connections with your faculty that's going to allow you to glean more from the things that they teach you, but also to build that connection where you're able to approach them during office hours or really any other time that you need. And what has really transpired for students like myself and even students who are still on our campus today is that we see that our professors are really able to care for you beyond just the classroom, but really holistically as a human being as well. So 12-to-1 student faculty ratio, huge perk here. That also translates to an average class size of about 15 students. So again, a small class size that allows you to glean the most from your classes. And perhaps most significantly is that we have 0 majors on our campus that have impacted classes. So because of our size, you are guaranteed to get the classes that you need, and you don't need to worry about a class running out of space that will then inhibit your graduation time. And last but not least, the number that you've seen at the bottom of your screen the whole time is that we do have over 1,200 campus jobs that are available to students. And so if you are here today knowing that you want to work while you are on campus, the good news is that we have those opportunities for you and quite a number of them to add to that. Okay, well, looking beyond your years in college, there are many other opportunities that exist to you as a graduate of Azusa Pacific as well. So for one thing, graduating from APU does set you up to continue in education, be it at the master's level or the doctoral level, and find great reaches for employability in the workforce, regardless of the industry, is what we find. This can translate into graduate school placement or finding a job that can either set you off into the career that you're looking for or become a stepping stone job that gets you there, and even give you and provide you with a competitive salary, both in the short and the long term. Quick statistic that speaks to that is that we found that 83% of the class of 2019, so from 3 years ago, from 83% of that class, we found that individuals from that class have found work or are continuing their education immediately after earning their bachelor's degree here at Azusa Pacific. And to speak to the average salary competitiveness that we just alluded to, here's a little chart that actually illustrates that very well. If you're anything like me, you learn by looking at things visually and really retain things that you see on a presentation. And so if you're like that, this is for you. This really helps illustrate it. And so like we had just established, APU alumni earn more over their lifetime than we find at other schools. And so this chart actually tells us a couple interesting things. And so we find that 2 years after graduating, the national salary is right around $27,000. But for our alumni, we actually find that the average salary is much closer to $42,000. And what you'll find is that as that time progresses, the discrepancy between the national average and our alumni actually increases, which means not only are you looking at a more competitive salary right out of the gate, but even after an elongated amount of time after you've graduated, do you see that competitive salary continue? Something else we talk a lot about here is sticker price versus the true cost of attendance. And so if you've already started looking into and applying to other universities, you may already be familiar with these terms. But to put it simply, a sticker price is the grand total of what a college will charge you for attending. And so oftentimes it's what you'll find if you go on Google and search for the price of a school versus the true cost of attendance, which is quite a bit different. And so the way that we calculate true cost of attendance is that we will take the sticker price, which is the baseline price of a university, and subtract any financial aid that you actually incur from that school, which equals the amount that you're actually going to pay to attend that school. So again, if you're visual, this helps quite a lot, these little blocks here. So the sticker price, you can imagine it as that huge 3D cube. Right? That's quite a hefty amount of real estate we're looking at there. Versus the true cost of attendance, where maybe we take a little bit away in the form of scholarships, or in grants, or in loans. So that slowly but surely, there is much less of that cube that is left for us to deal with once all is said and done. And speaking to that true cost, this is what you can expect from us. So we have found that the true cost of attendance coming to APU is much, much lower than what you'll find as our sticker price. If you were to Google us right now, that sticker price is going to come out to right around $51,000. Again, that's before any financial aid though. We find that the vast majority of our students end up paying closer to about $26,000, so almost half of that. And what I can tell you is that every single student here does receive financial aid of some sort. And so what that also means is that no one ends up actually paying that sticker price. And what is also really great about that is that as this chart shows you, our true cost of attendance is actually lower than the national average for private colleges across the continental US. This advantage also exists with our student loan debt. And so APU students graduate with less debt than the national average. So it's similar to our scholarships at a more competitive rate. And so we do accept student loans here, just like any other university. But we find that because of the competitiveness of our scholarships and other forms of aid, that many students end up graduating with less debt than they would have incurred had they gone to other universities across the United States. Alrighty, well, that is the end of part one. Congratulations for making it this far. Now we're going to pivot ever so slightly and talk about scholarships. And so if there's any form of financial aid that I would deem perhaps the most important, I would say that it is scholarships. And the key reason for that is because they're free money. You earn them for one reason or another, and in just about every case that I've seen, you do not need to pay those back. And so there's nothing better than free money that goes towards college, if you ask me, and this is exactly how you can get some of those. And so there are actually a few different types of scholarships that exist, and we'll be touching on just a few of those today. So the first of those are academic scholarships. These are awarded to you based off of your GPA and at some universities your test scores. Now for us, we are actually a test optional university. And so what that means is that we do not require your SAT or your ACT scores to consider for academic scholarship or even general admissions purposes. Other scholarships may be program-based, meaning that if you are part of a specific activity on campus that you may earn these as well. They include things like sports, clubs, or even specific majors that may have particular funding specifically for student scholarships. Or they may even be outside scholarships. Beyond immediate scholarships that you will see local to college campuses, you will also find that local organizations, online websites, and many other places will actually have their own scholarships. And so for us here at APU, we will accept those as well. It's just a matter of sending those funds that you earn directly to us, and we can factor those into your full financial aid package. Okay, so now we will touch on each of those three components a little bit more specifically. And so these that you're seeing in front of us here today are our specific academic scholarships here at APU. So again, we do scale these based off of your high school GPA, your weighted GPA, I will add. And so generally speaking, the higher your GPA, the higher scholarship you're looking at, and you do actually earn that scholarship all 4 years that you are a student here at APU. So it's a really great thing. You don't have to even do anything else to qualify for these other than to submit your general application. So once you do that, we will actually factor in what scholarship you get for you automatically, so you don't even have to do anything else. Something else that's worth noting is that at the very top is our trustees scholarship, whereas all of the other scholarships you see below are worth partial credit towards your tuition. Trustees is actually worth the entire amount of your scholarship or of your tuition here at APU. And so it's really great if you are looking to apply for that scholarship. There are a couple things you'll want to keep in mind, but it is a full tuition scholarship that we award to about 7 students every year. So more of those additional scholarships that we were talking about. So like we mentioned, scholarships exist in separate forms depending on what you may be involved with. So if you're an athlete on a campus like ours, which has 19 Division II sports teams, typically there's scholarships involved with that. Here at APU, there are scholarships involved with certain majors, like arts majors, music, or accounting. And we even have a very special scholarship here on our campus called the Multi-Ethnic Leadership Scholarship that is put on by one of the offices on our campus. And so again, needless to say, there are quite a few different opportunities that exist even here on our campus for additional scholarships in addition to your academic scholarship. Okay, great. Now we're going to go over and talk about grants. Okay, and this is where we changed gears a little bit on our financial aid topic, just because as we talk about grants and loans, these are actually in a separate bucket than our scholarships. And so with grants and loans, these are what we call need-based forms of financial aid. And so because of that, you don't earn them for having a particular GPA or being involved in a certain activity. These are actually calculated by your household income. And the way that that's actually going to be calculated is by one of two things. One, it could either be the FAFSA, which is a government form that stands for the Free Application for Federal Student Aid, which we'll be going into more detail with this evening, as well as the California Dream Act. And which of these documents you apply for does depend on your specific situation. But for the topic, for the purpose of discussion today, what you will want to know is that we here at APU do accept both of them. And so that is the good news today. So we'll talk a little bit more about FAFSA just because there are a few more moving pieces that do exist with this particular document. And so right off the bat, you may be asking, what is the FAFSA? Which is a valid question to be asking. And so here are a few things that I can tell you. As the name would suggest, it is 100% free. In fact, a quick pause on that. If you ever are applying for the FAFSA on a website and it asks you to pay for anything up front, unfortunately, there are some scam websites that exist out there. So if they're asking you to pay for anything or requiring you to do anything before you're actually able to apply, that is likely a scam, and I would encourage you to move away from that document. So it should not ask you for anything to pay from the get-go. Anyways, it is a free document and it's a federal tool that will help you earn financial aid through grants and loans. And again, this is need-based financial aid. And so the way that the FAFSA will determine just how much of these values you actually earn is by an index number that is called an estimated family contribution, or EFC for short. And so it's typically a number that is in the thousands, and it does not delineate a specific amount of money that you're getting. Like it's not like a dollar amount, but rather it's an index number that the FAFSA will use to place you in relation to all of the other families that are applying for the FAFSA. Something else you want to know is that it does actually open on October 1st every single year. And so whether you are a senior in high school and you're looking to apply this year, or you're an underclassman looking to apply some years down the road, that October 1st deadline is pretty firm. And so it'll open up every year on that day. And so another thing is that it must be filled out each year for the upcoming academic year. And so what that means is that even as you continue on in your studies in college, you'll want to send an updated version of your FAFSA so that your need-based financial aid can also be updated accordingly. So I would encourage you, if you are a senior or a family member of a senior watching this presentation today, to apply for the FAFSA as soon as it opens. It's just one less thing that you have to worry about. And what's really handy about it is that you can actually select up to 10 schools right off the bat to send that same document off to. And so once you do that, again, it's really simple. It gets sent out to all 10 schools and you don't have to worry about it from there. All right, and perhaps most importantly, where do I fill out the FAFSA? You're going to want to go to one of these two websites. It'll actually direct you to the same page, but I always recommend going to fafsa.gov. So it's fafsa.gov, not .com, not .org, because again, those other websites typically are going to be scam websites that will require some form of payment before you're able to proceed. Okay, great. So what grants does the FAFSA determine? Quite a few different things. And so there is a specific breakdown for all of these, which we'll spend just a little bit of time talking about today. So the first of these grants are federal grants. And so this is money from the national government. Examples of federal grants include the Pell Grant as well as the SEOG grant. And so the Pell Grant, that is directly tied to your EFC, which is tied to your household income. But the SEOG grant, that is actually a first come, first serve grant. And so I oftentimes like to call this the midnight premiere grants. And so what'll happen with that is that if you are one of the very first people to submit the FAFSA for the year, the FAFSA will actually give you a pat in the back and award you an additional $1,500. And so another reason to apply as soon as you can, just because not only is it one less thing to worry about later on in the year, It also means that you could potentially earn free money just for being early. So why not, right? Other forms of grants are state grants, which, as you could suspect, do come from the state that you live in. And so for us here in California, that comes in the form of a Cal Grant, which comes in values of up to $9,084 a year, again, based off of your EFC index number. And there are actually two forms of Cal Grants, a Cal Grant A and a Cal Grant B. And which one you are eligible for is dependent upon your high school GPA. So what will happen is that your high school counselor will actually send a GPA verification form for you on your behalf. As long as they get that in by March 2nd, that will then tell us and really any university whether you are receiving Cal Grant A, which is higher, or Cal Grant B, which is lower. And lastly, there are institutional grants that exist. And so these are grants that do come from a specific college or university. Here at APU, we do have a form of this in the form of our APU grants. And so you don't need anything else to qualify for this. This does also get factored in based upon your EFC number. And one fun thing that may be worth noting is that just over half of our students, 52.6% of our students, do receive the APU grant in some way, shape, or form. All right, getting ready to land the plane on our presentation here today, but this brings us to our loans section. And so loans function differently than any form of other aid that we've talked about so far. Whereas all the other aid that we've talked about is given to you and you do not need to worry about returning it in any way, loans are different in that you do. They are borrowed money that comes from the government that needs to be returned, typically with interest. And so if you are going to look at student loans, I would typically advise you to do so after you've considered all of the other forms of aid that we've already discussed. Just because again, you don't have to pay those back. And so it serves a much greater benefit to you if you take advantage of those first. But today we will go into a little bit of details as to what you can expect with loans. And so on the topic of student loans, there are actually two different types that you'll want to be aware of. The first is a subsidized loan, as opposed to the second, which is an unsubsidized loan. So with the subsidized loan, it's really great because what will happen is that the federal government will actually cover the interest that normally would accrue on that type of loan all the time that you're in school and even 6 months after you graduate. So that entire time, typically it's about 4.5 years for students. If you do graduate in 4 years, you have zero interest on that loan, but it doesn't start building up until after that time has expired. Now, alternatively, as you could probably piece together, an unsubsidized loan does not have that benefit on it. And so what that means is that you can pull from that loan and use that towards tuition, but what it will do is that it's going to accrue interest as soon as you pull from it. And so with that in mind, the subsidized loan is the more advantageous of the two, just because of that delay on the interest that you do have on it. Couple things to note about loan limits. And so when it comes to those student loans that we just talked about, there is a maximum amount that you can be eligible for as a student. And so this is true across the national expanse of universities. And so regardless of whether you come to APU or any other school, this will be true for you. So it's worth taking note of. As a freshman student, you have a maximum of $5,500 that you can pull from in student loans. As a sophomore, that does go up to $6,500. And then in your junior and senior year, you have a total allowance of $7,500 that you can pull from in loans. But keyword there is can. You don't have to. You could pull just a portion of it if you'd like to, or you could leave it to the side if you don't want to touch it at all. The option remains in your hands, regardless. The other type of loan that you'll see here is a Parent Plus loan. I won't spend too much time on that today, but to make a long story short, this is an additional loan that can be applied for via the FAFSA website. And as it says here, limits vary and is based on the additional application that you'll submit on that Direct Parent Plus loan. All right, and with that, that brings us to the end of our main presentation here today. Thank you so much for listening to what we have. In just a moment, we'll jump into our Q&A session. And so If you do have any questions about anything that was shared today or really anything else that you may want to know a little bit more about, now is the time to place those in that Q&A box, and I would love to address those. But even if you don't have questions today, if you would like to get in touch with us here in admissions, we would love to continue our conversation with you. So please feel free to send our front desk an email at admissions@apu.edu or to give them a call at 626-812-3016. Alternatively, if you have already been in touch with your specific admissions representative on our staff, you can also feel free to contact them directly as well. All right, well, without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen so that we can address all of the questions that I am seeing come into our Q&A box. All righty, let's see here. Okay, I'm seeing some great questions, so I'm going to go ahead and just start right from the top and make our way down on our list of questions here today. So the first question I'm seeing is the cost per year including the cost of dorm living? That is a great question. And so if you remember that diagram that we saw earlier that compares the sticker price versus the true cost of attendance, the sticker price does include the cost of dorm living. And so here on our campus, the cost of a dorm room and a meal plan, or what we would typically call room and board, that does exist at a cost of about $10,000 a year. Now, if you are going to be living here on our campus, you will have that on your account, but if you're commuting, then you actually don't need to worry about that. And so your true cost would then, of course, not include the cost of a dorm room, and so you wouldn't need to factor that in. But if the question was if it's included in the sticker price, then yes, what you'll find on Google, that sticker price of about $51,000, that is included on the cost of dorm living is included on that. All right, great question. I hope that answers the crux of what you're looking for. But if it doesn't, and this goes for any question, feel free to leave us another question right below and we can jump right back to that. So not a worry. Okay, next question I'm getting is, do students who were previously in foster care receive extra financial aid? As far as I know, we here at APU don't have specific funding for foster care students, but what was recently drawn to my attention is that there is a Chafee grant for California colleges. And so what I can actually have my friend Randall do, and it looks like he may have already done so, is he put a link to where you can find information on that in the chat. And so if you would like to take a look at what that funding is, we do have that there. Okay, great. Next question I'm seeing, how much does it cost to live on campus? Great, related to what we were just talking about. The cost of living on campus is about $10,000 a year. And so that does factor in the cost of a dorm room as well as a campus meal plan. Okay, next question. Let's see here. Okay, great. The next question I'm seeing is a specific EFC question. And so this person is saying my EFC is at X amount and I'm a full-time employee right now. The question is there any way for me to have more aid from the school? I'm paying alone for my expenses, even though I live with my parents and I'm under 24. That is an excellent question as well. And so there are a couple different things I can draw your attention to. For one thing, like we talked about, there are a variety of scholarship opportunities here on our campus. So I would encourage you to look there first. But something else I can also tell you about is what we call an EFC appeal. And so going back to that EFC index number, which is generated from the FAFSA, right? Filling out an EFC appeal is basically your way of raising your hand to the FAFSA saying, hey, I filled out my application. I told you most of what's going on, but I don't think I got a chance to fully articulate what is actually in my situation. So in a case like that, where you are working full time and you are living at home, but perhaps there's more dimension to what is in your situation than previously accounted for, that's what the EFC appeal process is. And so by filling that out, you'll be able to write more about what is actually happening, and the FAFSA will then be able to consider if you are then eligible for more in need-based financial aid. So that would be the second thing I would draw your attention to. Next question, how do we know how much we need to take out in loans based on our majors? And that's an interesting question just because you actually don't need to base how much you take off in loans on your major. Here at APU, none of our majors cost any more than another, and so your total financial aid will not be impacted in any way based on what you study. And so really, rather than looking at what you're studying when it comes to determining how much you need to take out in loans, I would take a look at a couple things. I would look at the rest of your financial aid, how that is impacting your overall financial aid package, and then have an honest conversation to think, hey, okay, I'm getting this much aid, and this is how much I have left. Right? Can I afford to cover this out of pocket? Do I perhaps need a little bit more help to fund this? Or is it honestly just maybe out of the question, right? That warrants a discussion. And so I would look at some of those factors, of course, which you'll have more details of once you actually apply, have your scholarship and your complete financial aid package together. And then from there, you'll be able to make the most informed decision as to if you're going to be taking out loans at all, and if you are, how much you'll actually need. Okay, we have a question about the trustee scholarship. I knew one of those would be coming up tonight, so excited to touch on that. The question says, when is the soonest a student coming in the fall of 2023 would hear about their qualification and being a finalist for the trustee scholarship? How does the process work? So yeah, let's talk about the trustee scholarship. Personally, for me, I think it's one of the coolest opportunities we have here on our campus. And so to paint you a timeline picture of what you can expect, the deadline to apply for the trustee scholarship is November 15th. And so you'll want to make sure that if you're applying for this, that you have your general application as well as your trustee's application all in by that date, again, November 15th. And so that trustee's application is going to be asking for 2 letters of recommendation, one from a personal source and another from an academic source, as well as an additional essay. And so once we have all those materials in, you're good as far as our application goes. And then we close that on the 15th of November. Once that happens, our committee is going to very, very carefully look at all the applications that we receive and then narrow it down to our finalists. Historically, we've had about 49 to 50 finalists that will actually qualify for this. And if you are chosen for a finalist, you'll actually be invited to spend a couple days on our campus for our trustees weekend events. So during this event, you will get to spend the night on campus amongst the other trustees finalists. You'll get to experience life here as a student by going to class and seeing a few activities, but you'll also participate in some final interviews that will then narrow it down to our actual recipients of the trustee scholarship. So all in all, again, historically, we have had about 7 students every year that do end up receiving the full tuition scholarship. But even if you don't get the full scholarship, it is still worth applying for. And that is because historically what we have also done is we have offered scholarship incentives for every person who makes it past a certain round. So for example, last year we offered $2,000 annual scholarship to students who made it past our first round of selection. And we actually offered $5,000 to all of our non-recipient finalists of the trustee scholarship. So again, totally worth applying regardless of how far you get. It's just free money we're looking at, right, at one way or another. So I would definitely encourage you to apply. All right, next question. Do student loans, I'm assuming student loans, apply to someone who is over 60 and returning to school? My first instinct is to say yes. Truthfully, it does depend on your specific situation. So if you are applying as an undergraduate student, whether it's for the first time or as a transfer student, to my understanding, you do qualify for student loans as long as you submit a FAFSA. And so how much of subsidized versus unsubsidized loans is another question, but to my knowledge, you do receive those regardless of your age, as long as you are applying to an undergraduate degree. All right, next question. Are there visit weekends coming up? Love this question, and the answer is yes. So here at APU, we do host a variety of events on our campus, and as far as weekend events go, we actually have our first one for the year this Saturday. And so we call it our Open House Saturday, where you will get to hear a little bit from our admissions team, engage in a campus tour, and even have lunch on us on our campus. And so if that sounds enticing to you and you want to learn more about what our university has to offer, this is the event for you. And so in fact, what I'll actually do is if I could have Randall post the link to our Open House Saturday registration page in the chat, that way you'll be able to register and even take a look at what that event entails. Another event that would also be good to bring to your attention that we have coming up in just a little bit is our APU preview. And that is an overnight event where you'll actually get to spend the night in a current student's dorm room and once again, experience life here as a student amongst all of our other prospective students as well. So we have both events coming up this semester. I would encourage you to take a look and even register for one or two if you're interested. In my opinion, they are the greatest way to get a feel for if APU is a school that you could see yourself coming to. All right, I'm seeing more questions come in. This is great. Keep them coming, guys. We've got about 20 more minutes, a little over that, to answer more questions. So we have plenty of time to answer more of those as they come in. Okay, the next question is about music. The question is, do you happen to know the acceptance rate for APU School of Music? Right off the top of my head, I don't have an exact percentage for you, but what I can tell you is that there are no specific academic requirements we're looking for specifically for the School of Music. And so all you'll need to do is to send in your basic application and declare a music major. And then from there, we'll be able to evaluate your application just like any other major. What is worth noting though, for the School of Music as well as any of our other arts majors is that this year we're using a platform called Get Accepted. And so once you fill out the application for any arts major, whether it's music, whether it's arts, whether it's theater, you'll actually be directed to fill out a separate application via Get Accepted. And this is just to submit your artwork to us in order to consider you for a few things. So for music, it's just signing up for an audition. That's how we'll actually leverage you for art scholarships through the School of Music. This also applies for the theater department as well. But for majors like graphic design or our games and interactive media major, they'll actually ask for a portfolio of your past artwork. And so depending on which arts major you're applying for, there may be different things you're actually submitting. But regardless, if you are submitting to an art major under the College of the Arts, you will want to fill out a Get Accepted application for those supplemental portions. The next question is about FAFSA appeals. Where do I fill out the FAFSA appeal? Do I fill it online through the Student Gov website or APU directly? That is going to be through our website, actually. And so what I will always say is that if you are going to submit an EFC appeal, I would actually wait until a bit later in the year when you've narrowed your choices of schools down to maybe your top 3 schools. And the reason for that is because every school is going to have their own process for an EFC appeal. So I guess there's nothing stopping you from submitting those while you still have, let's say, maybe 10 choices up your sleeve. But the only downside to that is that you are then going to have to submit 10 different EFC appeal forms, which isn't the most fun thing, right? So if you are looking to do that, again, I would wait until you've narrowed down your choices so that you can get only the forms from the schools that you are really, really considering to then fill that out for an EFC appeal. Next question is about the Trustees Scholarship. Do we apply for the Trustees Scholarship every year? The answer is no. You only need to apply for it the incoming year as a high school senior. So the key thing for that is that you don't actually have the opportunity to apply for it as a transfer student or once you're on our campus. You can only apply for it as an APU incoming freshman student. All right, next question I'm seeing, how much is tuition for out-of-state applicants? It is the same cost across all 50 states. And so regardless of if you're applying from California, Arizona, Hawaii, Illinois, any state in the continental US, we do not have additional fees for out-of-state. And so the only thing that may be a little different is your state grants. And so the downside to that is that you sadly do not qualify for Cal Grant as a non-California resident, but your actual cost of attendance does not change, purely based on the merit of you being from a different state. Okay, got a couple more questions about the Trustees Scholarship. I knew this was the right crowd to be talking about that with. That's great. So where can we find the Trustees application? The answer to that is twofold. And so if you haven't started an application yet or are still in the process of submitting one, you can actually find it right there on that main application. A part of the application will ask you if you are applying for the trustee scholarship, and it will ask you yes or no. Just hit yes, and if you hit yes, then it will present you with our 2 remaining drop downs, which will allow you to submit email addresses to send off to your letter of recommendation people, as well as your additional essay. Alternatively, what you can also do is we actually have an external link on our website that you can find the scholarship details on. So if you've already submitted an application and didn't get a chance to apply for the trustee's application, or if you're just curious about it, you can actually find that link to our website on our website with more details and submit an application that way. So it looks like Randall read my mind. He has that link in the chat for you. So if you're curious, go ahead and click on that link he just put in the chat, and you can hear all the details about our trustees scholarship. Next question is, what is the GPA for the trustees scholarship? Great question. We are looking for about a 3.9 weighted GPA or higher to be considered for that. Now, if you are just a little bit lower than that, like a 3.8, especially if you're a high 3.8, I would still encourage you to apply. We do look at GPA certainly, but we also look at your letters and your essay, which is why we ask for those. So if you are just on the fence of that 3.9, I would not let that stop you. I would actually go ahead and consider the scholarship even in that position. All right, when do you find out if you were accepted for any other scholarships besides the trustees scholarship? I assume this is referring to our main academic scholarships here on campus. And so what I can tell you about that is that you will actually find that out upon your acceptance here at APU. And so what we do here on our office is we practice what you would call open or rolling admission, rather, is the term. And so what that means is that we are constantly checking for new applications and review them whenever we see them. As opposed to many public schools, what they'll do is they will do all of their reviews after a certain deadline, and you won't hear back until much, much later, regardless of when you apply. For us, that's not the case. So if you apply today, typically we're able to get you a acceptance decision within 2 to 3 weeks is our typical turnaround time. And so as soon as we finish that up, you'll get a call and an email either from myself or from another person on our team. But at that point, we will have your admissions decision for you, as well as details to with your academic scholarship and which one you are receiving. All right, looks like we're getting to the bottom of our questions here. We do have a little bit more time for some more. So if you have any last minute questions, I encourage you to put those in the Q&A box right as we're finishing up here today. But in the meantime, let's go ahead and address some of what we see here today. So the next question we're seeing is, how much of the cost does that Dean Scholarship cover? So historically, the Dean Scholarship being one of our middle scholarships, that usually covers around $18,000 a year. And so you can expect something in that range if you do qualify for the Dean Scholarship. But falling into the range that it does, that also means that our scholarships have room to be lower, but they also have room to be higher as well. All right, next question is asking, can you talk more about the other academic scholarships? And so I certainly can. If there's something specific you wanted to know, feel free to leave another question in the chat. Generally speaking, though, what I can tell you is largely what we've discussed already, that your academic scholarship is scaled based off of your high school GPA. We do look at your cumulative weighted GPA as well. And so, depending on where that is, the higher GPA, the more scholarship you're looking at. And you do get that every single year you're a student. And so it's repeated money that gets thrown into your financial aid every year, pretty much without question. The only thing you'll need to do is to maintain a 2.8 GPA or higher throughout your studies here at APU. And if you can do that, then you will get that scholarship, no questions asked, each and every single year that you're a student here at APU. All right, does the trustees scholarship consider your overall high school GPA or the GPA received for senior year? Like our academic scholarships of the non-trustees variety, we do consider your cumulative weighted GPA. Is there extra financial aid for single parents? Yeah, yes and no is what I want to say, and here's why. And so typically for single parent households, of course, that means it's a single income household. And so typically what that means is that in those types of households, there's going to be less money coming in, which typically will mean you'll have a lower EFC. And so in that regard, you are typically looking at more in the form of need-based financial aid, so in those grants and loans we talked about. And what I would suspect is that you would more more readily receive a bit more aid in the forms of those just because your income is what I would expect going to be a little bit lower than a dual income household would be. But in terms of scholarships, that really has no standing on those. And so in that regard, no. But in terms of need-based aid, that's where the yes comes into effect. All right, are there any scholarships for students with a 2.8 GPA, and can they be layered with an academic scholarship? The answer to both is yes. And so typically, we are looking for a 2.5 weighted GPA or higher for you to be generally admissible to APU. And so even at that level, it is a bit lower on the GPA scale, but you are still looking at a scholarship here at APU regardless. And that does stack with an athletic scholarship or a program-based scholarship or even an arts scholarship. All of those are given in conjunction with an academic scholarship. So yes, you would get both in that scenario. All right, if I have a GPA of around a 3.7, what is the estimated scholarship I could receive? Generally speaking, what I would expect based off of where our scholarships have fallen in the past is that I would suspect you to fall in the Dean Scholarship category. So again, historically speaking, that's been right around the $18,000 mark. And so I would be ready for something about that you would receive at each and every year as a student. Okay, next question. How many academic scholarships are offered each year for each specific one? 7? Question mark, question mark? The answer is, well, we give scholarships to every student. And so while the trustees scholarship is given in very limited quantities, we have no limit on our academic scholarships. Every student gets one. So that means you get one. If your friend applies, your brother, your sister, everybody will get one as long as they apply. So there is no limit to that if there was any worry about that. And so we're never going to run out of funds for those, I guess is another way of looking at it. Okay, let's see here. Okay, if I'm reading this question correctly, I believe it says, is the $25,000 amount that most students pay, is that included cost or is that additional cost? The $25,000 true cost of attendance, which again we do find is just about the average of what most students pay, that is what's remaining for most students. And so after we've considered financial aid, again, scholarships, grants, loans, all of those, after we have taken those into consideration, we do find that that most students end up with a remaining cost right around $25,000 a year. All right, what is the scholarship you said that everyone gets if they apply? That is our academic scholarship. And so again, you're looking at one of 5 different options depending on what your high school GPA is. And so while I can't tell you definitively what that is right now, we will be able to once we receive your application with your high school GPA in mind. Okay, looks like we're getting down to the wire on our questions here. How can I apply for the Dean Scholarship? Very simple. All you got to do is submit a scholarship for or submit an application rather, for our general application. There is no additional process that you need to apply for simply by submitting a general application with your high school transcript. That is also your application for an academic scholarship here at APU. So best thing you can do is to start an application. In fact, Randall, if you could actually put the link to our application in the chat, I think that'd be great. You can start an application today. It is open. And again, by submitting that application to us, that is exactly how you will apply for an academic scholarship here on our campus. All righty. I'm seeing a question from my friend Chantel in the chat. Good to see you, Chantel. Our multi-ethnic scholarship is what she's inquiring about. And so, yes, I'd love to tell you more about that. So that scholarship is a scholarship that is put on by our Student Center for Reconciliation and Diversity. So it's a really cool opportunity. And so Basically, what will happen is if you are the recipient of our MEL scholarship, as we'll call it, you and the small cohort of other students that do actually end up receiving it become the spokespeople of the topic of diversity here on our campus. And so if you enjoy speaking about these things and really being somebody who spurs change on a campus, this is the scholarship for you. So it can be applied for on the SCRD website, which is that office that puts the scholarship on. And just like any of the other scholarships that we have talked about today, those do come in addition to any other academic scholarship that you may also be earning. So definitely worth applying for if you are looking to potentially earn more scholarships on our campus. Okay, looks like we have one final question here. So if you do have any last minute questions, go ahead and type those in right now. But the question is there a big difference in scholarship if a GPA is 2.89 or 3.25? The answer is yes. As far as I can tell, that is the difference between one tier of our scholarships. And so again, we're looking at the bottom tier as opposed to another tier up, which of course does involve more money that you're looking at each and every single year as a student. All right, well, thank you very much for joining us today. It looks like those are all the questions we have. And so if you do have any other questions after today, I would encourage you, please feel free to reach out to us. We'd love to stay in touch. Feel free to send us an email at our campus email address, which is ugadmissions@apu. Admissions@apu.edu, or our campus line, which I'll actually have Randall put in the chat as well. Okay, and just as I'm saying that, it looks like we have a few more last minute questions. And so what I'll do is I will answer, we got two more questions here. I'll answer the last two, and these will be the last questions of the night. Okay, and so the first question is, do you have a link of the scholarship info like the tiers? I don't think we have one quite yet, but if you're curious about what these scholarship levels are, we will have those soon. What we do have on our website is a estimation cost calendar, or not calendar, but a calculator rather. And so it's a very generalized form. And so it doesn't give you the exact breakdown of your financial aid, but if you wanted a very basic estimation as to what you could expect given a few things, that estimation calendar or calculator is what you want to look at. And the last question we have today is, I actually use an estimation calculator. That's okay, that's great for scholarships. Do I receive the exact amount? The answer is no, not necessarily. You may, but that's exactly what the estimation part of this comes into play. You may end up getting exactly what you're thinking. It may be a little bit more, maybe a little bit less. Truthfully, we won't really know for certain until we actually receive an application and have a specific breakdown for you. So the best thing I can say to you is that if you're curious, submit an application today, and as soon as we get back to you, we will have a much better read as to what that will be for your specific situation. Alrighty, everybody. Well, again, thank you so much for joining us for our very first Paying for College session of the year. We are sure to have more sessions like this throughout the rest of the year. So be on the lookout, come join us for a tour, join us for an event, and most importantly, submit an application so that we can be in touch with you. But have a great night. We're looking forward to staying in touch, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of your evening as we depart today. Thank you so much. Take care, everybody.